I'm sorry I'm running late. You guys, can anybody hear me? Anybody hear me, please? Give me thumbs up if you can hear me. Awesome. Awesome, guys. So here in just a moment, I've got my friend Dakota with Mind Evolution. He's going to be coming on and he's going to try to moderate for it because obviously I can't be reading, at the same time I'm trying to respond to questions. I want to make this as interactive as possible because I know all of you have a lot of questions, but I want to try to make these questions as general as possible, please. So instead of saying your specific, case, that this happened to me, this particular scenario, if we could try to be a little bit more general so we can help a large group of people, that would be incredible. That would be wonderful. So for instance, instead of saying, what about when a judge says that I can't present this evidence, right? I mean, whatever. Instead of saying that, say what would happen if a judge refuses to accept evidence. That way we can keep it much more general, much broader. I know that all of you have individual questions that you want to get answered, and I would like to answer them, but we need to just try to make this time as useful as possible. So Dakota, as soon as you get on, brother, go ahead and, I believe, request. I tried to add you as moderator. For some reason I couldn't find you. So my name is Tanner Downey, and I'm a civil rights advocate and litigator. I'm out of Washington, D.C. here. You guys that follow me, you guys are aware of what's going on. So let me just run through, before we start any questions here, let me go ahead and just start by explaining where we're at in general. So I provided notice to 33 state attorney generals, to their agent, assistant attorney generals, or law enforcement, state patrol. I did that in April and May of this past year. What happens there is that when you provide notice to agent, you provide notice to principal. So the intent was to notify the highest executive officer within the state of specific crimes and a criminal conspiracy that exists by and between agents of the state. And so we wanted to, provide that notice. Go to the highest law enforcement officer, give him an opportunity to respond. If he fails to respond, then remember the other half is notice to principals, notice to agent. So by notifying the highest law enforcement officer, him failing to take action to correct the unlawful acts of his agents, every single agent is now implicated within the criminal conspiracy. We don't got to go around and waste our time, going to prosecutors and law enforcement and serving every single one of them for the crimes that they're committing, when we can just go to the top and get it all done all at once. So we provided notice first to the executive officer. Then we went out in August, and we provided notice to those same 33 states to the Supreme Court of the state through the agent being the clerk of court. Now, because they failed to take action, now we can show that all of the judicial officers within those same states have failed to take action to mitigate the criminal acts that are being committed by and between their own agents. And so now we don't have to go through and notify all the judges of their particular crimes. We can just go to the top and say, hey, this is a crime that's happening. Do you want to do something about it? When they don't, then awesome, great. So, we can't keep these guys from breaking the law. We can't prevent them from exercising power. But what we can do is we can show them that should they choose to exercise their power without lawful authority, that's going to make you a criminal. So as I was explaining to Dakota earlier this morning on the phone, that what we're doing is we are drawing a line in the sand, right? And we're saying, hey, this is what the law states. This is what it states, clearly states. And you guys are clearly operating outside of that law. So we're going to give you an opportunity to return to the established rule of law and obey it. And if you don't, then you're knowingly and willingly engaging in criminal behavior, which is a whole different ballgame. And so that's where we're at now today. So the criminal conspiracy that we brought up, very, very specifically, Clause 1 of Amendment 5 to the United States Constitution says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. That's clear. You got to have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting someone and holding them over for a capital or infamous crime. An infamous crime is any crime punishable by more than 1 year imprisonment in a penitentiary. That's according to Title 18, subsection 4083. So if you can get more than 1 year, it is an infamous crime. Therefore, according to the Constitution of the United States, it requires an indictment by a grand jury before arresting you and holding you over for that particular offense. So now, United States versus Coachman, United States Supreme Court case, it said it's not the amount of time that you get sentenced to, but the amount of time you can be sentenced to. So most gross misdemeanors are also infamous crimes because you can get more than 1 year, right? So just because you get 3 months doesn't mean that it's not infamous. It's not the crime that determines the infamous nature of it. It's actually the amount of time that you can be sentenced to, which triggers the requirement for the indictment by a grand jury. So now we have the baseline requirement, because we all know that the Fifth Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights. It's guaranteed to every single person within the jurisdiction of the United States. There's no question that, none whatsoever, right? So if that's the baseline requirement, then when a state enacts its own alternative legislation and substitutes it for the provisions that guarantees the Constitution, such as the state of Washington did in Article 1, Section 26, where it says no grand jury shall be or summoned in any county, then that means that the state of Washington now has a law and its inferior provision or inferior constitution that functions directly to contrary to the United States Constitution. And now we have a supremacy issue. Now we have to bring in what's called preemption. We have to determine which law is supreme. Now we all know that the United States Constitution is going to be the supreme law of the land. That's the one that's going to be supreme. So again, I was talking with Dakota, my friend, this morning because he's dealing with an issue up in New Hampshire. And so, he brought up the fact that, yeah, but the New Hampshire state constitution says that this court has jurisdiction. And I had to point out the fact that I don't care what the New Hampshire constitution says. Because if it says something contrary to the United States Constitution, it doesn't matter. Push it aside. It's a lie. It's bullshit. It's not true. So what we got to do is we got to get a mindset of going to the Constitution. Because if we go to the Constitution, we rely upon it, then all these lies that are created by the states, all these judge-made rulings that are created by judges, they don't matter. None of them are with force or effect if any one of them functions directly to contrary to the United States Constitution. Because if not, then that would mean that the state laws are more powerful than the United States Constitution. And we know that that's not the case. We know that the states aren't going to win. So if the state has created a law, right, substituted for the guarantees of the United States Constitution, that would be an unconstitutional law. And according to Norton versus Shelby County, United States Supreme Court, any unconstitutional law, it doesn't create any office, it creates no authority, it provides no protection, it creates no obligation, it is as inoperable as though it never even existed, and it's not unconstitutional from the day that it's deemed such, but from the day it was created as though it was never even created, because it's always been unconstitutional. That's why I said the other day that when it comes to Chevron, don't look at what the court said. When the court said, oh, but this isn't going to affect past cases, bullshit, right? Bullshit. It's always unconstitutional. The executive branch never had authority to be able to create its own law or amend the existing law, because that's a separation of powers issue, right? The Constitution is clear. Clause 1, Article 1 says all legislative power is vested in a Congress of the United States consisting of a Senate and a House of Representatives. That means all power to create law. That's what legislation is law. So all power to create law is vested in the legislative branch. No other branch of government can create law. That's why the executive branch creates orders, right? Executive orders. But remember, orders only affect those that are being ordered, right? So it only affects those within the executive branch, right? It only affects those that are there. It doesn't affect people because the people are only affected by laws. The executive branch has no authority to create law because all legislative power is vested in Congress of the United States, consisting of Senate and House of Representatives. So when the executive branch modifies the law based upon what they call their ambiguity through their policy or their orders, we don't have to follow that. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with those people that work for you that you can order, but you can't order the people because you have no authority to order the people because the people order ourselves, right? So then the third branch of government is the judicial branch, right? And the judicial branch is there to administer the laws. They create rulings, right? Judge-made rulings. But rulings must be consistent with the law because judges are tethered to positive law. So when a judge creates a ruling that's contrary to the law, the statutory law, the written law created by the people, then what they created is nothing at all. It's in violation because what they're doing is they're now amending the law based upon their rulings. And the judicial branch has no authority to amend the law because all legislative power is vested in the Congress of the United States. So if a judge creates a ruling and then calls it law, such as they do today, they call case law, that's not law because judges can't create law. They create rulings. The people create the law. All legislative powers vested in Congress of the United States. So my particular argument, the writ that we filed last September 29th, to the United States Supreme Court, it has to do with this particular issue. That the only way that we can make the law, particularly alter the Constitution of the United States, must be done by the people, through an authentic act of the people, in accordance with the special amending procedure of Article 5. Any other way, any other amendment, or any other modification would be unconstitutional because it's contrary to the procedures and process established and codified in the Constitution of the United States. So when a state does create a law, right, and substitutes it for the guarantees of the Constitution, that would be a state deciding that we can do whatever we want, right? That would be the executive branch making a determination that we can create an order, and we can modify the Constitution. We can do something contrary to what it demands, even though, guess what? You don't have the authority to do it, right? That's why Article 6 says the judges in every state shall be bound thereby anything in the Constitution or laws of any state contrary notwithstanding. You see, that particular provision, that particular obligation in Article 6, it does two things. That you shall be bound by anything in the Constitution, even if a state creates something contrary. So the bound by anything in the Constitution means that the judicial branch can't order them to do something different, right? Because they're bound thereby anything in the Constitution. So when the judicial branch, being the Supreme Court of the United States, when they create a ruling and say, oh, yeah, judges, you don't have to have an indictment by a grand jury. You don't have to do that. Well, what happens there is that the judge entered into his office. When he entered into his office, he created a contract. That's what an oath is. An oath is an establishment of a contract. So he promised a future outcome. He promised to do certain things. Those certain things are codified in the Constitution of the United States. When he fails to do those certain things, he has now breached his contract, violated his oath, and already implicitly invited punishment in the form of perjury should he fail to do that. Right? So judges do not have the authority to say, oh, well, the judicial branch told me to do this, because they're all independent. Their oath is with and to the Constitution directly. That's not to the flawed decision of the man that came before them or the flawed decision of the man that came before him. Their oath is with the Constitution. And if they decide that they're going to not be faithful to the Constitution and instead rely upon the decision of the man that came before them, then that means that they're relying upon case law instead of constitutional law to determine the outcome of the dispute, which would be a violation of the Constitution. It would be a violation of their oath. It would be inconsistent with everything we believe here in America. And that's exactly what Justice Gorsuch is out talking about today. So when I filed the writ last September 29th, what you got to remember is that then on November 11th, Justice Gorsuch at the United States Supreme Court, he came out with a judicial notice. Sent this judicial notice out to every single federal judge in the entire country, right? You guys are welcome to find it. It's out there. What he said is, he said most of the people in prison today are there illegally and unconstitutionally because the court is relying upon administrative law, not common law. He went on to say that most of the property that's being taken from the people of the United States is being done illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are relying upon administrative law, not common law. And he had a third element. And he said that most of the children being removed from the families is being done illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are relying upon administrative law and not common law. So going back to the separation of powers that I was just discussing there, to understand what Justice Gorsuch was getting at, well, we got to look at the separation of powers. All legislative power is vested in the Congress of the United States. All power to create law is vested in the people, right? The executive branch creates orders, right? Orders only affect those that are being ordered, right? So it only affects the people within the executive branch, not the people of the United States, but the people that are within the branch. So they don't create law, they create orders, okay? And they are there to enforce the law. Now, the third branch of government is the administrative branch. That's the judicial branch. They're there to administer the law. Therefore, when the administrative branch creates a ruling and calls it law, that would be administrative law. So when the Supreme Court of the United States comes out, such as they did in 1887, right, in the case Hurtado versus California, they said, oh yeah, state of California doesn't have indictment by a grand jury within their constitution. They don't have to do it. It's okay. They got something different. They do information. You know, Chief Justice Waite and his court made this terrible decision, which was totally unconstitutional and illegal, but nonetheless, they modified the Constitution of the United States based upon their ruling. And when you modify the Constitution by your ruling, right, you are a branch of government that has no authority to change the Constitution because all legislative power is vested in Congress of the United States, the people, and the way that you change the Constitution is defined within Article 5. It has nothing at all to do with the judicial branch saying, oh, yeah, you don't have to do it. That's not how it works, judicial branch. You have no authority to alter, amend, or destroy the law. So when they do that, and they create a ruling, and then they direct all the states to follow their ruling, and the states create a law based upon reliance upon the ruling, well, once again, going back to Norton versus Shelby County, any law that's unconstitutional it doesn't create any office. It is inoperable as though it never existed. It is fully void without force or effect on any party involved in any of the disputes. So when the judicial branch says, yeah, we create rulings, but we're going to call it law, guess what, guys? It's unconstitutional. Judges don't create law, right? You can't legislate from the bench. So when the judges create case law, call it law, direct all the courts within America to follow their case law and not the Constitution of the United States, not common law, then guess what, guys? Everything that they've done is unconstitutional. All these laws created by these states are all unconstitutional because they all rely upon what we call today stare decisis. Stare decisis is bullshit. Judges don't create law. So when you create a ruling, you call it law. It's clearly outside of the separation of powers, and any law that's unconstitutional is unconstitutional from the moment that it's created, not from the moment it's deemed such. Nothing that this country, nothing these courts are doing are valid because they all rely upon a judge-made ruling that they lied and told the people is law. It's not law. It's a ruling. And rulings must be consistent with the law. So to the judicial branch, if you want to modify the Constitution because you think it's too hard to secure a grand jury indictment, because you think it's too hard to investigate a case to find out if there's sufficient probable cause to assume it's been committed, if you want to transfer the duty, the burden of proof from the state onto the individual and the defendant, that's fine. Make your case to the people of the United States. Get the people of the United States to adopt that consistent with the procedures and process codified in the Constitution. And until you do that, what you're doing is treasonous. It is sedition, because sedition is defined as the speaking or writing of words, such as law established, in order to cause disaffection to the Constitution to procure its alteration in an other than lawful manner. Anytime you try to change the Constitution in an other than lawful manner, that is the crime of sedition, which is treason. Okay? Very simple. Very, very simple. The judicial branch, judges, have no authority whatsoever to do something contrary to what the Constitution says, because what gives them their authority, what creates their office, is the Constitution. So when you choose to violate that which gives you your powers, don't think that it's going to protect you when you offend or harm the very individuals or the very people that the Constitution is designed to protect. It's there for our protection from our government. Therefore, government cannot breach the terms of that Constitution to hurt the people and then expect to find immunity, because that's insane. That's silly. It doesn't even make sense. So the very government that was instituted, right, to protect the Constitution, to preserve it and to administer it, cannot become willful accomplices in destroying it, such as we see today. So this is a pretty big deal, all right? And before I go into some questions here, I want to bring up one big point here, okay? And that is, how did we get into this situation that we're in today, right? How do we get there? So the Supreme Court is not what you think it is, okay? It's not what you think it is. Because if what we call good is out there killing people with absolute immunity, that can't be good, right? That's evil. And only evil is able to create evil. Good is incapable of such an act. So when you have the Supreme Court of the United States that goes out and says, you know what, I want to enslave the people of the United States, and these institutions that we call sweatshops in China, but prisons here in America, when they say that they're going to do that, what was the purpose in creating our government? Was it not to preserve the rights not given up in the social compact? So the government was there to protect our life, protect our liberty, and protect and provide us with an environment where we can find happiness. Those are the three things that they were required to do. So the contract that was created that established our government said, government, you need to preserve our liberty. You need to defend it. You need to protect our liberty. Everyone's liberty. Everyone. Because that's what the government's obligation is. So when government breaches the terms of their contract in order to enter into a new contract with the people to enslave them, well, by the breach of the first contract, you nullify the second contract. That's simple contract law, guys. You can't breach the terms of a contract to enter into a new contract through the breach without breaching both contracts. They're both unconstitutional. They're both breached because that's all it is. The Constitution is a contract. We created it. We gave it to our government. We said, government is according with these procedures and obligations. And they said, okay, we'll do that. And in doing so, they accepted the obligation of preserving or protecting our liberty and our life. And then what did they do? They went out and said, well, yeah, but I want to enslave these guys because we make a lot of money off of that. You cannot breach, judge, the terms of your contract, the Constitution, in order to enter into a new contract with the people to enslave them in a for-profit institution we call sweatshop and Chinaman prison here in America. Now, we know that you are doing so through contract because according to Title 18, 4083, that no one can be sent to prison without their consent. That's an interesting term, consent, right? Because what is consent? Consent is a contractual term. So by contract, we are sent to prison. However, Thomas Jefferson and John Locke said that that slavery cannot come by way of contract. You can't enter into a contract to enslave yourself. That was said by our own founding fathers. You cannot enslave by way of contract. And yet here in America, you can't be sent to prison without your consent, which is a contractual term. And so it is by our contract, our consent, that we are sent to prison. Nobody can go there without giving their consent because government cannot take away your freedom in your life because they have a contract in place that says we can't do it. So when you go to prison, you're not going there because you have to. You're going there because you agreed to. So that's a big problem, huge problem, because slavery cannot come by way of contract, and yet the 13th Amendment says that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except as punishment for crime, which means that a prisoner is a slave and a slave is a prisoner. And therefore here in America, it is by contract that you become enslaved, which was directly foreclosed upon by our founders. Pretty big problem. So what happened here? Well, going back to the beginning of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court's not what we thought, what they think they are. If what we call good is out killing people with absolute impunity, it cannot be good because only evil is able to produce evil. So if you think about, since the late 70s, since we reinstated the death penalty here in America in the late 70s, there's been almost 1,500 people executed here in America. Did you know that 139 of those people were proven to have been innocent after they were murdered? 139. Of the remaining, another 186 were exonerated after being placed onto death row. They are factually innocent after being placed on death row. Those two numbers combined represent more than 18%. 18% of the people that have been on death row were factually innocent and either murdered or spent years, decades on death row. Is that good? I don't like those numbers. That doesn't sound good to me. Not only that, but if you were to open up the criminal procedure manual written by a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, if you were to open it up and you were to go to the preface, go down to the 4th paragraph, what it says, and this was written again by a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge. So a federal appellate judge said, most prosecutors across the United States agree that as much as 15% of people in prison are innocent, but that's an acceptable deviance because our system isn't perfect. So we have a nation that was founded upon the belief that it's better that 1,000 guilty go free than for one innocent man to suffer. And yet we have a system that says, oh yeah, well, we know that 15% of people in prison are innocent, but sorry, luck of the draw, system's not perfect, whatever. We're doing the best we can. Well, that's not the best you can. Because before you call something imperfect, right? Before you blame it for your laziness, your incompetence, I would suggest that you first use it the way that it's designed to be used. Don't blame it for your incompetence, because the very first step is being missed. The grand jury is there to protect the innocent from hasty or malicious charges. If the guilty have rights, what about the innocent? Where's their rights? Huh? When I'm innocent and I have someone accuse me of a crime, right? Where's my option of being innocent? Where's my presumption of innocence? Where's my opportunity to be able to say, oh no, I want to confront those accusations before you send me into an institution where you're going to deprive me of my life, my property, my liberty, right? You're going to destroy my reputation. Where's my rights? Where's the innocent's rights? That's the purpose of grand jury. is to protect the innocent from hasty or malicious charges. So state, when you choose to bypass the one protection and countermeasure that exists to protect the people from your arbitrary and capricious acts, then don't be surprised when 15% of the people in prison are innocent, or when 18% of the people that you send to death row are innocent. And I guarantee you those numbers are a lot higher than that. I guarantee you they are way higher than that. Those are just ones we know about. So we still have evidence to be able to prove it. We can still show it. That's not good. That's evil. So the first thing we have to accept is there's an old philosopher that said that there's two types of fools in the world. There's those that choose to believe in something that isn't real, and there's those that refuse to believe in what is real. America's made up of a lot of fools. Sorry, a lot of fools. Because the majority of Americans believe in something that isn't real. And that was me 9 years ago. I was involved in I was high up in government here. I was deploying national security solutions for every single tier 1 seaport in the United States. I was doing international megaports in the detection of illicit materials, right? I was way up, and I believe it. I believe in America because that's America. I believe in it because I'm told to. Because theoretically, the system should work. But there's a difference between theory and application. You don't know application until you're face to face with it, right? You see, what we have going for us today is the fact that Justice Brown on the United States Supreme Court, she's the only justice in the history of the court that has ever done criminal defense work, ever. The rest of them have all been theoretical work. Well, yeah, by theory, the system should work. If we did it the way that it's designed, it should work. But none of them ever know because not one of them have ever done criminal defense work but her. So we have a real advocate on the court already right now that's going to be pushing us and going to be along with Justice Gorsuch, because Justice Gorsuch, he's openly outright on the trail right now today, with his book talking about these exact same things that we're talking about here. When a state relies upon the administrative law to determine an outcome, that administrative law was made by a judge. It was created by a state on reliance of a judge, and regardless, it is not the Constitution. So you got to look at the hierarchy of law. Hierarchy of law is extremely important. The foundation is the Constitution. Everything comes from it. It's the foundation, okay? Next would be what's called treaties, right? A little bit bigger body of law, but treaties. Next would be statutes, right? Followed by ordinances and customs. That would be all of what's known as positive law, right? Law is created by people, a body of men that's constitutionally authorized to be able to create law, technically, that's by definition. So everything must be consistent with the Constitution. Everything must derive from it. Anything that's contrary to it is unconstitutional, right? But that's all positive law. Now, above that is another body of law known as common law. And that's a massive body of law. Huge body of law, right? Huge. But that's known as negative law, right? It's known as negative law because it's not in a written form, not created by a body of men that are constituted with authority to be able to do so. That's called negative law. Now, the very, very bottom of common law is known as judge-made rulings, right? What they call case law, right? Which is an oxymoron because judges can't create law. So to call case law is a lie because judges don't create law, right? And herein lies the problem that we have today is that judges don't create the law. So if constitutionalism is based upon suffrage, meaning the people, we decide and we change it based upon vote, majority makes a decision to change the Constitution or change the law, that's done by the people, then it takes the majority of the people to decide how to change the relation. 2/3 of the people, in fact, 3/4 of the states to alter the Constitution. So majority of the population must make a decision to alter the Constitution. That would mean that the opposite of constitutionalism then would be judge-made rulings, because that's one man imposing his will upon the rest of the nation. That's something that's known as legal realism, right? Which is the belief that law is not based upon a formal set of rules or principles, but instead upon judicial decisions that derive from their own social, political, or public policy. So when judges make rulings and call it law based upon their own social, political, public policy, that's known as legal realism. And legal realism is not constitutionalism, because constitutionalism is a government of laws, right? The law is the foundation and everything comes from it. So if a judge-made ruling is the opposite of the Constitution in the hierarchy of law, then here's the problem, all right? Here's the problem. If you have a constitutional right that's been violated, You go into the court and you say, yeah, my child was taken from me. That was protected and guaranteed, right? Does that judge go to the Constitution to determine whether or not your rights were violated, or do they go to a judge-made ruling to determine whether or not your rights have been violated? Go to a judge-made ruling, which means that they're going to the opposite of what they're supposed to go to. Our whole system is upside down, every bit of it. That's why I say that we got to do the opposite from now on of what they tell us to do. So when they say go to case law to argue a case, no, I'm going to go to constitutional law. When they tell us to go to the lowest court, we're going to say, no, I'm going to go to the highest court, right? When they say, file an appeal, we're going to say, there's nothing to appeal. I'm going to do a habeas corpus, right? Because everything that they've been doing has been leading us the opposite direction of where we want to go, because they're all criminals. And criminals have been leading us, and as a result, we are now in an environment of criminality. If we turn and we start going the other way, then we can offset them. We can defeat them very, very quickly and very, very easily. But you must do the opposite of what they say, because clearly, if we're going in the wrong direction, right? If we keep losing over and over and over again, we don't understand why, then we can either be insane and keep on doing it, expecting a different result, or we can say, you know what? I'm going to try this other direction. I'm going to go the opposite direction. Let's see how that works, because it's going to work, right? That's where I'm at. So an attorney goes through adjective law. They learn about statutes, ordinances, customs, judge-made rulings. They learn about all these laws that take away freedom, because that's what they're in the business of. They create a slave. That's what they do, right? And we know from the 13th Amendment that a prisoner is a slave and a slave is a prisoner. So we know exactly what it is that they're talking about when they say a prisoner. They're talking about a slave. And so as a result, they create slaves. Now, substantive law, all that I studied was the constitutional laws of the United States. That's it. That's all I studied, right? I have a degree in enforcement of law. They have a degree in administrative law. That's why they are an administrative officer of the court. That's Juris Secundum, Volume 2. Right? So every single attorney is an administrative officer of the court. They learn administrative law. They learn about all the laws that take away freedom. So when you go to an attorney and you say to an attorney, hey, I would like to have you do this post-conviction relief for me, you guys, they're incapable of such an act. They're not trained to do so. The only thing they're trained to do is to make a person into a criminal. That's why I need this system in general to understand that there's a whole different type of technical expertise that exists out there called substantive law. People such as myself. There's not very many of us because there's no money in it, because, of course, anybody that's having their rights violated doesn't have money. I don't do this because I get paid. I do this because it's the right thing to do and because I'm capable and qualified to do it. I went to the most expensive university in the United States right down the road from where we're at right now. I graduated with 3.96 GPA with my first master's degree. I know this particular type of law. I have a degree that a prosecutor should have. The prosecutor should not have a degree in administrative law. Because if all that they can see, because all that they've been trained to do is put a person into jail and make a slave out of them, then they are unable to look at things from a neutral and biased perspective. I am. I want the truth. I want to know the truth because I've been trained to learn the truth. You know, if there's 3 parts to every single crime, right? Corpus delicti, actus reus, and mens rea. Well, without mens rea, which is a guilty mind, without a person knowing that they committed a crime, there cannot be a crime committed. If there's not awareness of a crime, you cannot commit a crime. So for all these people that are using drugs, they don't know that they're breaking the law, because the moment they get out, they're going to go do it again, because it's not a crime to them to do it. There's no mens rea. For these people that are out driving their cars without a driver's license, the law says they can do it. There's no mens rea. There's no crime. Without mens rea, a guilty mind, there cannot be a crime committed. These prosecutors aren't trained in that particular type of law. They don't know these particular elements because they haven't been trained in this particular technical expertise. I have. And we need the system to understand that people like me needs to be in the role of prosecutors, attorney generals. This is the position I need to be in because I'm trained to be able to determine the law, the enforcement of the law. So if a prosecutor is the highest law enforcement officer in the country, if the president of the United States is the highest, the chief law enforcement officer, then he damn well should probably know a little bit about enforcing the law, wouldn't you think? So again, going back to where we're at today. So what happened was the Supreme Court of the United States, they're not what we think that they are. From the very, very beginning, from day one, the Supreme Court of the United States has been against the Constitution. They've been putting into place rulings. They've been undermining it. They've been undermining the Union because guess what? Peace and harmony A good harmonious union does not create conflict and crime. Conflict and crime creates them and their institution a lot of money. So they're not for peace and harmony. They are for states' rights, because states' rights have always been code word for discrimination, right? For treating people unequally. So when you talk about states' rights is a decision that was made by the court in order to create conflict, because conflict makes them and their institution a lot of money. If we had a harmonious union, there wouldn't be crime. Right? If we didn't proliferate this concept or this idea of racism, there wouldn't be crime, right? All of that creates division, it creates conflict, it creates tension. So, one of the reasons why we have never been able to overcome this situation that we're in, this enslavement institution that we have, is because we've accepted what the government has told us. They tell us every single day that slavery is a race-based issue, right? It's a race-based issue, right? And there's a number of different reasons why we would think that it is, and I'll come back to that in just one moment. But the problem is that it's not. It's not a race. It's not. Slavery is not race-based. Every single slavery institution that has ever existed in the history of the world has been an economic-based system. Economic-based. Because if you owed a debt to someone and you couldn't settle that debt, you could sell yourself into slavery in order to settle the debt. It was a feasible alternative for debt management. That's an economic issue. It's not a race issue. It's an economic issue. Now, our slave-based system we have today is no different. It is an economic system as well, because here's why. If you choose to violate the law, you incur a debt that is owed to society, to which you are charged and then called to account so you can pay the debt. Those are all accounting terms, and accounting is economics, is it not? So when we talk about the race issue, racism is something that was created. It was created by our government in order to pit the people against each other. Because as long as we are fighting against each other and believing that race and slavery is based upon race, then we don't come together and realize that it's the government that's the true antagonist, because economics is the government. Race is the people. So this is what's known as a diversionary tactic that was created by our government. Our government is one of the best at creating these. I used to do it all the time, right? You create a diversion. Get people looking in opposite directions so that they don't see what you're doing over here, right? It's a sleight of the hand. That's what they're doing. Oh, race, look, this is a race-based system. Fight amongst yourselves while we steal all of your money and property and your children and everything. No. Racism is created. Now, one of the big reasons why we believe that racism is systemic to the system is because of the overpopulation or overconcentration within the prison system. That appears as though it is a race-based issue. And I agree. I mean, at first glance, you're like, oh man, look at how many of this particular race is impacted by this. It's got to be a race-based, they've got to be focused on it, right? But that's not true, right? That's another sleight of hand. Because if you look and see who are the lowest socioeconomic producers within a particular area, what you're going to find is that minorities are going to be the lowest socioeconomic producers because they've never been raised up out of the slavery institution. So when you go into the South, you're going to see the lowest socioeconomic producers are going to be the highest concentration within the justice system. They're going to represent the highest numbers. And unfortunately, that is a minority group that's there. So you're going to see a massive overpopulation, even if it is an economic issue. And that's where we're at. So it still is an economic issue. And the reason why we haven't been able to solve this problem as of yet, right? We keep on coming back to this, think about it. We have civil war, 1 million people that died, doesn't work. We have the Reconstruction Amendments, doesn't work. We have convict leasing, doesn't work. We have the convict leasing, doesn't work. The Civil Rights Act doesn't work. We're now at mass incarceration. Is it going to work this time? Only if we know what the enemy is. Only if we know what the enemy is, because before we haven't accepted what the enemy actually is, because we've accepted what the government's told us it is, which isn't true. We can't solve the problem. You can never, ever, ever fight a war without first knowing what the enemy is. If you go into battle with an unknown enemy, it is a sure way to be defeated. And we've been defeated over and over. We don't have to be defeated this time because we can accept the fact that, guess what, right? We didn't cause this. This wasn't our fault. Racism is created by our government, and it's not natural for one human being to hate another human being. I'm done with this bullshit. I'm going to care about my brothers and sisters. I'm not going to let them die on the side of out of the streets here, because they don't have food in a nation that's the most wealthiest in the world. We're not going to do that shit anymore, right? These are our brothers and sisters. We cannot continue to proliferate this idea that any one of us is better or different than another. Thomas Jefferson said, we gain civil rights as a result of choosing to protect and defend the rights of others. If you are unwilling to protect the rights of your fellow man, by not doing so, you forfeit the rights yourself. That's why I fight for them. I fight for them vehemently for everyone else, because you know what? The only way I'm going to get those rights is by fighting for everyone else's rights. That's the only way. If I don't fight for their rights, then I give up my right to that right. And I don't want to give up my rights. I don't want to give up my freedoms. So if I go around the world pretending like I'm free, and yet I'm saying lock up my brothers and sisters, enslave them, take away their money and their children, then how can I ever expect to be free? Right? That's an illusion, right? You know, there's one paragraph within my opening arguments to the Supreme Court that says that we who are free can only boast in freedoms that are real and not an illusion. We're each only as free as the freedoms that are extended to all and not simply some. Any time a freedom is demanded or stolen from one through justification or ignorance, that freedom and right is lost to all and not simply a target of scorn and punishment. Any freedom which can be removed from one, can be removed from all, is no longer freedom, but simply an illusion of freedom. Evil shows no favoritism. When evil is given birth, it becomes a thief. And once a thief, we all must bear the consequences of its evil thievery. So any right, we've got to fight against the shackles against all men, in all instances, in all conditions. Because if we don't, then the very shackles that we place upon our brothers and sisters will one day be placed upon us or someone that we love. So if we don't fight against the shackles of all men, in all instances, in all conditions, then we ourselves are going to wear those same shackles, because the freedoms that we believe we have are nothing more than an illusion. Because if you can take that freedom from one person, you can take it from all people. So we've got to step up, and we've got to fight for everyone's freedoms, because that's the only way that we can guarantee our own freedom. All right? So again, going back, Supreme Court, not what we say that they are. This is what happened, okay? Supreme Court, 1833, the Supreme Court of the United States, under the Marshall Court, in a case called Barron versus Baltimore, said that the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, that they are not a restriction against the state government. They're only a restriction against the federal government. So as of that moment, 1833, none of the rights that are contained within the Bill of Rights were given or granted to anybody in the entire nation, because guess what? If it's only a restriction against the federal government, the only place the federal government exists is 10 square miles of Washington, D.C., right? That's it. So only place that has all the protection of the Bill of Rights is the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. That's why I'm safe here in Washington, D.C., is because I'm protected by the entire Bill of Rights while I'm here, because it's the only place that federal government covers. So 1833, the Supreme Court comes out and says, nope, Bill of Rights are not a restriction against the states. States do not have to follow them because they're not a restriction against them. Therefore, the only rights that the people were given from 1833 on were whatever is contained within the state's individual constitutions, right? Now, that ruling was completely unconstitutional. However, there is a little bit of truth in it. And the little bit of truth is this, that Marshall was partially correct in that the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states because it applies to the people of the United States, including those people that reside within a state. You see, states don't have rights. States have powers. People have rights. Government has powers. So he's correct when he says this, that the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states because it applies to people, right? But this particular, line in the sand was taken advantage of and has been taken advantage of for 220 years or whatever, right? This is the reason why they do the things that they do. Why you don't get the rights that you believe you have is because the Supreme Court of the United States came out and said, yep, Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states. It's not a restriction against the states. The reason why Marshall did that was because 6 months after Barron versus Baltimore was put into place, the First National Bank was put into place. First National Bank was established, right? So now we have the National Bank that was established. The reason why they did that was because the federal government knew that the states were going to sue the moment the First National Bank was put into place, because we all knew from our history that the easiest way to enslave a nation is through debt, right? So the states were vehemently against the national banks. In fact, Andrew Jackson destroyed the bank. But nonetheless, Marshall paved the way for the First National Bank to be put into place because they had to figure out a way to prevent the states from suing, right? Because they knew that they were going to sue. They knew that states were not going to be all right with it, so they had to make it so that the states didn't have standing in federal court. Now, to have standing in federal court, you've got to, one, be a person, and two, you've got to be directly impacted by the laws. So if the state's representing an aggregate of the people, then the state can sue on behalf of the people to the federal government, right? So they couldn't say that the states were not representing the people, couldn't do that. So they had to say that the law didn't apply to them, right? So that was the reason why they did it, is because to eliminate standing, or to have standing, you have to be directly impacted by the law in question. Therefore, if you're not impacted by the law in question, you don't have standing in federal court. So what Marshall did was he paved the way to allow for the establishment of the Federal First National Bank to be put in place, and then he made it so that the states couldn't sue to remove that national bank by saying, Constitution doesn't apply to you states, you guys don't have standing in federal court, go away. We don't have to hear your case after we put it in the national bank. That's the reason why he did it. It's complete bullshit. But that's why they did it, nonetheless. So now, as of 1833, people don't have the rights that we believe we had. They aren't there. We don't have them, right? It wasn't until 1925, a case called Gitlow versus New York, where the very first right within the Bill of Rights was ever protected by the people, or against interference by states. That was a case called Gitlow versus New York, 1925, and it was the freedom of speech. Now, you would think that the moment that the freedom of speech is protected, one of the provisions within the Bill of Rights are protected, that they all be protected, but that's not what happened. No, Gitlow versus New York said, yeah, freedom of speech is protected against interference because it's codified in the Constitution's text. Okay, it's codified in the Constitution. Well, what about the indictment by a grand jury? Or what about religion? What about freedom of press? What about the jury trial? They're all codified in the Constitution. Why aren't they, protected as well against interference? No. Only the freedom of speech was protected in 1925. And that started what was called the incorporation doctrine. They started slowly incorporating each of these provisions one at a time. So, for instance, 1958 was the Miranda versus Arizona, or 68, I believe. Anyway, Miranda versus Arizona, which was the right to not self-incriminate. It's the self-incrimination clause, that no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to act as a witness against themselves. Yeah, that became incorporated by that case. Or Duncan versus Louisiana from 1962. It said that the jury trial is protected against interference by states. So they started slowly incorporating one at a time each of the provisions of the Bill of Rights, all the way up until the last one that was incorporated was in 2019. It was a case called Timms versus Indiana, and it was the Eighth Amendment's excessive fines clause. Now, the last one to be incorporated was 2019, the excessive fines clause. What the Supreme Court said, and it's many of the same justices we have on the court right now today. So the same justices, they can't really go back too easily on what they said in 2019. What they said is that the privileges and immunities of United States citizens are at a minimum those enumerated within the Bill of Rights, given their legal effect against interference by the states due to their codification within the Constitution's text. In other words, if it's written in the Bill of Rights, it is at a minimum those rights guaranteed to every single United States citizen. Therefore, through the 14th Amendment, when it says that no state shall create any law that shall abridge the privileges and immunities, no state shall create any law that shall abridge the privileges and immunities of United States citizens, right? Then that means that any state law that abridges, diminishes, takes away, removes, whatever, violates any of the privileges and immunities of United States citizens would be unconstitutional, period. Violation of the 14th Amendment. So when the state of Washington says no indictment by a grand jury, we're not going to hold a grand jury, then that would be a law created by a state that directly abridges the privileges and immunities of a United States citizen, unconstitutional. State of Washington. Therefore, the history of the state of Washington, because once again, going back to Norton versus Shelby County, any law that's unconstitutional is unconstitutional from the moment that it's created, not from the moment it's deemed such. State of Washington, have you ever convicted anybody in the history of your entire state constitutionally? Anyone? No, you haven't. Neither is Pennsylvania. Neither is Michigan. Neither is Connecticut or Oklahoma, right? These are states that have got a law that functions directly to contrary to the United States Constitution, and yet the privileges and immunities of the United States citizens are at a minimum those enumerated within the Bill of Rights, given their legal effect against interference due to their codification within the Constitution's text. We got more than 700,000 people across America today that are illegally and unconstitutionally imprisoned in these for-profit industries that directly benefit the state that we call sweatshop in China, but a prison here in America. You know what pisses me off every single day is I have to go down here and I have to meet with these lawmakers, which to me are quite shallow and insignificant anymore. I hate being around these people in D.C. I want to get back out there with you guys because I can't stand these shallow pieces out here. But you know, when I have to go and talk to Hawley, for instance, Josh Hawley from Missouri, Mr. Hawley, You know, you sit on the Senate Judicial Oversight Committee. You're in charge of understanding the judiciary of the United States of America. In fact, you were the Attorney General of Missouri, were you not? And yet, every single time I hear you in a press conference, you're talking about China being the worst civil rights violator in the whole world, right? You fucking hypocrite. Take the goddamn plank out of your eyes, because guess what? China has 1.2 billion people in their society. And yet they have 1 million of their own citizens in abusive and oppressive conditions, where in the Myanmar Peninsula, right, that are working in involuntary servitude conditions. And yet, guess what, Josh Hawley? We have 330 million people in America, and we have 2.9 million of our own citizens in abusive and oppressive conditions, making t-shirts and sweatshirts in what we call a sweatshop in China. Who is the worst civil rights violator? If you take our population and you extrapolate it to the 1.2 billion, that would mean that we, America, would have 12 million of our own people sitting in abusive and oppressive conditions. And yet you want to talk about China being the worst human rights violator? You sit on the fucking committee. You sit on the committee that's supposed to know this shit, and yet you can't even look at America. Like, we wonder why we don't get respect across the world. But domestic policy that is in direct conflict with foreign policy is rendered ineffective, and we are rightfully labeled hypocrite, right? You cannot have a domestic policy that functions directly to the contrary of our foreign policy. If we don't practice here at home what we go overseas and preach, then how effective is our preaching going to be? We're not fooling anybody. They all know what we're doing. We imprison at a rate of 16 times more than the next closest industrialized nation. We have 5% of the world's human population, but 26% of the world's prison population. And then we want to talk about Iraq or Iran or any of these other nations setting their people free? Josh Hawley, pull your head out of your ass, sir. And I'm being quite respectful with the sir, because I don't say that same thing around your agents, by the way. So again, we have the Bill of Rights guaranteed to every single person, every single citizen. At a minimum, that's what we are guaranteed. So in Clause 1 of Amendment 5 says no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. And yet we have 32 states across the country that either do not conduct a grand jury at all, or they permit their prosecuting attorneys to charge by grand jury indictment at their discretion, which is unconstitutional, because the moment that a prosecuting attorney can say, this guy is going to get a grand jury indictment, but this guy is not, guess what? 14th Amendment also says no state shall create any law that does not provide equal protection of the law. Therefore, when you create a law that permits your prosecuting attorney to decide who gets a constitutional right and who does not, we have another violation all over again. So now every single person that relied upon that particular law, right, is also unconstitutional. So regardless, we have approximately 2.7 million people currently imprisoned here in America, illegally and unconstitutionally, because the state has created a law that functions directly to the contrary of what the Constitution demands. And then the state agent relied upon that inferior state law to deprive a person right that's guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States, even though their requirement, their oath, their obligation is to obey the United States Constitution, not the inferior state constitution. They've already implicitly invited punishment should they fail to not follow the Constitution of the United States. And perjury is a violation of public trust, punishable by 5 years in prison. So where we're at today, Timms versus Indiana was the last provision to be incorporated and under the incorporation clause. You guys, there is one provision left to be incorporated. One. That's Clause 1 of Amendment 5. It's a grand jury indictment provision. You see, the moment that we finish this, the moment that we overcome this one provision, this last one, once we incorporate it, entire Bill of Rights will finally, for the first time in the history of America, every single person in the entire United States, no matter where they choose to reside within the jurisdiction of the United States, will be guaranteed every single right secured by and enumerated in the Constitution of the United States. That's what we're working on right now. That's where we're at. Like, this is the first time in the history of our country, every single person will be protected by every single right secured by and enumerated in the Constitution. That's how big of a deal this is. Never has anybody ever been protected by the entire Constitution. Never. And this particular provision, this is the hardest one of all to get, because this is the one that sets the slaves free. This is the one that they didn't want to have to remove, because this is the one that permits them to be able to imprison anybody they want, any way they want, enslave them for an indefinite period of time. This is the one they didn't want to have to overcome. This is the one they've been lying about for 243 years. But this is the one that we have to overcome, because when we do, what we get to do is we get to go back to Barron versus Baltimore, the ruling that's in place. And we get to say, you know what? Barron versus Baltimore was a ruling that you call law, and that law was unconstitutional because, look, every one of these has been incorporated. Every single one of these we were protected by, always protected by, every one of them. And therefore, we can go back to Barron versus Baltimore from 1833. We could say, you know what? Norton versus Shelby County says that any law unconstitutional, it's not unconstitutional from the moment it's deemed such, but from the moment it was created, as though it was never even created. We get to go back to 1833 to Barron versus Baltimore. We get to say, you know what? Supreme Court, when you made a ruling and you directed every single court within your purview, every single court in the entire nation to follow an unconstitutional law, a ruling that had no authority to take away the very rights that were guaranteed to the people of the United States, what happens when we do that? We remove all the progeny to it. And every single criminal case in the entire nation is all relying upon Barron versus Baltimore, because the highest court in the land stated in 1833 that no criminal defendant gets any of the rights that are guaranteed. No United States citizen is guaranteed anything that the Constitution guarantees. By the introduction of the fraud by the highest court in the land, remember, fraud is fatal to every judgment. Civil, criminal, doesn't matter. Every judgment. When we go back to Barron versus Baltimore, we remove it. All the progeny must be removed as well. There isn't going to be a single person with a conviction here in America. We're going to be able to raise every single slave up to an equal status. We'll be able to start our nation over the way we should have been 243 years when our founders and forefathers failed us by creating a discriminatory system that's founded upon the slavery institution. We will finally be able to. Okay. One second here, guys. I don't know what's going on. Right there. Okay. So, for the first time in the history of the country, right, every single person will be protected by every single right, because we will have taken all the people that were enslaved, all the minorities, all the discriminated, all these classifications that the system uses to create division amongst us. We will be able to settle all of those, raise everyone up to an equal status, and we'll be able to start over. Now, one thing I got to say right now is that I am not advocating the release of dangerous people into the community. Not at all. Not at all. I would never advocate such a thing. But what I am saying is that there's a better way to deal with this, because the issue of morality is not a matter of punitive justice. It's not a matter of punishment. It's a matter of public health. So if there are people that are a danger to society, they still have an unconstitutional judgment. We still have to address that. We can't keep anybody with an unconstitutional judgment in place, because if we do, then we're permitting the slavery institution to continue to proliferate. We cannot do it. We've got to settle this slavery institution once and for all, cut it off at the head. Doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. Period. Every bit of it is gone. What we got to do there is, if they're a danger to society, we need to shift them from a punitive judgment into a civil incapacitation. So we're going to transfer the jurisdiction from Attorney General, who's punishing the people today in these institutions and enslaving them. We're going to transfer it over to the public health system, right? So we're going to put them into an institution where we can heal them, so that hopefully we can make them in a condition where they can eventually not be a danger to society anymore. So we're going to take the hurting, we're going to heal them in an institution that's able and qualified and capable of healing them, instead of putting them in an institution that's going to hurt them and cause them to go out and commit more crime and proliferate. So, we can do this, and that's really what we're pushing. So we want to make sure that every single person, for the first time in the history of our country, is guaranteed and protected by every single right contained in, secured by, enumerated in the Constitution of the United States. We have the ability to do that because we have one provision of the Bill of Rights left to incorporate. It's the grand jury clause. Once we do that, then for the first time, we will see a whole unified nation. E pluribus unum, out of many comes one. So Dakota, I'm going to look real quick here, and I'm going to see if you guys are on. You guys if we could take like a 3-minute break here. I'm going to scroll through here, see if I can find Dakota, get him on as the moderator, so we can go through some of these questions. I'm sorry it took me an hour to get through that, but you know how I am. I'm preparing for an argument with this court, and I'm not supposed to give them an inch of speaking room. So this is what I'm prepared for. 1 second, guys. Dakota, if you're on, please give me a thumbs up so that I can see you. Okay, all right, good. I'm gonna try to invite you right now, brother. Let's see if I can invite you. Add moderator. Okay. All right, you're added, brother. I don't know if that adds you as video. Let me see. Okay, I'm not muting you or anything else, so you should be good. You should be able to accept it, I do believe, brother. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about while you get on here. I did send you an invite, brother. You should be able to accept it right now. Yeah, you're listed as moderator right now, brother. I would say probably click on your name. I don't know if anybody can give him directions. This is the first live I've done on TikTok. So if anybody can help him out, that would be awesome. And we can get him on. I added him as a moderator. It shows him as a moderator. And so if you guys are able to help him provide any directions, that would be great. So let me I'm going to start with a question that came in just a little bit ago from Tyler or Kevin. So Kevin is going through family court at the moment, and he had they're wanting child support. Okay, wanting child support. And he was told that if he doesn't pay his child support, that they're going to be filing felony charges against him next month, and they're going to charge him with, 3 counts of felonies or whatever, or felony, and he's going to get 18 months in prison. Well, unfortunately, a felony is an infamous crime, right? So first off, who is the accusing party? Well, the accusing party would be the state, because it's the state that's saying you didn't pay the state your money. State can't be a party in the cause, because if the state is a party in the cause, then the state must recuse itself from being the judge in the cause and whatever. But what Kevin was specifically getting at was, he was saying, you know what? That kind of feels like they're threatening me. Well, very good point, Mr. Kevin, because here's the problem, okay? So robbery and extortion are extremely close together in the criminal spectrum. Extremely close. Robbery is to formulate a contract through illegal means with a threat of immediate bodily harm. Okay? Extortion, however, is to formulate a contract through illegal means with the threat of future bodily harm. So let me lay it out for you. I'm a citizen of the United States. I have certain rights. I have the right to bear arms. If I go and buy a gun, and I take that gun, I point that gun at you, and I say, if you don't give me your money, I'll shoot you, right? My ambition, then I am formulating a contract for your money, and you agree to give it to me. But the way in which we formulate that contract is a crime, because duress is a justifiable defense for a crime, breach of contract, or a tort. You can never use duress to formulate a contract. So when I use the threat of immediate bodily harm to formulate a contract for your money and you give it to me, it's not being done out of your volition. You're not agreeing to do it because you want me to have your money. You are doing it because of the threats, intimidation, duress, and coercion that I've now inflicted upon you, and that's a crime. You will go to prison for that, because that's called robbery. Now, extortion is to formulate a contract through illegal means with the threat of future bodily harm. So if I'm a prosecutor, I have certain power as well. I have the power to send you to prison. I have the power to give you charges. If I come to you and I say, if you don't pay your child support, I'm going to send you to prison for 18 months. Guess what? You're formulating a contract with me, but the way in which we formulate this contract is through illegal means with the threat of future harm. Right? That's called extortion. It's a crime. You cannot formulate a contract through illegal means with the threat of immediate or future bodily harm, period. So my case is bringing forward what's called the formula of intimidation. All intimidation follows this particular formula. And once you hear it, it will make complete sense to you guys, okay? So it goes like this. If you don't do X, I will do to you Y, whereby X is my envisioned outcome and Y is the result of my powers and cause. So again, with the robber, right? If you don't give me your money, X, I will shoot you, right? So the formula of intimidation is if you don't do X, I will do to you Y, whereby X is my envisioned outcome and Y is the result of my powers and cause. So if you don't give me your money, I will shoot you. My envisioned outcome is I want your money. Result of my powers and cause is I will shoot you. You formulate the contract as a result of the duress that I've inflicted upon you. That is a crime. And therein lies the formula of intimidation, right? I abused my powers of owning a weapon, right, in order to get you to formulate a contract with me through the use of that threat and immediate bodily harm. Now I go to prison, right? Because a crime has been committed. Now, if I'm a prosecutor again, I have certain powers. If you don't plead guilty, I will send you to prison for 18 months, right? My envisioned outcome is I want you to plead guilty. Result my powers and cause, I will send you to prison for 18 months. It's the exact same crime, you guys. Exact same crime. A prosecutor can't say, I'm going to abuse my powers of sending you to prison or giving you charges in order to formulate a contract with you, because if I do, it's a crime called extortion. So no one is above criminal law. That's the fallacy that we all have. And so this is so important that you guys understand this. There are three types of immunity. There is absolute immunity, there's judicial immunity, and there's prosecutorial immunity, right? Those are the three main ones. All three of them. Get out your phones, get out your dictionary, whatever. Look up absolute immunity. It says absolute immunity from civil actions conducted in your affairs or business. Civil liability, not criminal liability. Civil. Prosecutorial is immunity from civil liability in the prosecutorial duties. Judicial is immunity from civil liability in the course of judicial duties. All three of them say immunity from civil liability, not criminal liability. If you commit a crime, you're accountable for that crime. Every single person is accountable for every single crime that they commit here in America, everyone. The immunity only covers civil liability, because you don't sue the agent for the crimes that they commit because they were directed to do it by their master, the state. You sue the state, you sue the agent's master. But before you can have liability for the agent's master, before you have anything to sue for, you must first show that the agent breached their duty, and you do that through criminal liability of the agent. This is a catch-22. This is the reason why most people are incapable of getting their civil rights restored, because they fail to understand that before you can have a right that's been broken or taken away or breached, you must first show that someone had a duty to protect it. Someone had a duty to protect it. And that comes through criminal liability of the agent. But you can't hold the criminal or the agent liable because he's just doing what the master of the state told him to do. But you can't lock the master up in prison for his criminal acts because it's just a state, right? It's nothing. So you have to hold the agent criminally liable first, and the moment that the criminal is held criminally liable, then you can sue the master for the actions of the agent. It has to come through criminal liability. That's what I do. That's what I do. That's what I'm working on. I'm trying to free up the obstruction for all of you so that you guys can sue to restore your civil rights through civil injunction, right? I'm trying to clear that up by showing that all of these government agents, they all had a duty. They all had a law that they had to follow. They all had an obligation that they had to follow, and none of them did it. They all broke their obligation, which means they all committed a crime, which makes all of them criminals. Every fucking one of them is a criminal. Every one of them. They don't want this to happen because the moment that they do, we've shown that now your rights have been violated and now you can seek civil injunction and relief. But you cannot have a right violated until you show that someone else had a duty to act and they breached their duty. That's what I'm working on. And so a lot of people are against me, right? They don't understand me, right? Because they're all building these RICO cases and these lawsuits and all. I don't care about money. I care about what's right. I care about the law. I care about who's wrong. I'm law enforcement. I'm not administrative law. I don't want a lawsuit. I don't want to sue. I don't care about your damn money. Not you guys, but the money. I'm not doing this for that reason. I'm doing this because the people need help, because there are criminals that are oppressing the people and hurting them, right? So I'm committing the first step. I'm doing the first step here of holding the government liable for the crimes that the agents are committing, so that when I do, all of you then can seek your civil injunction. You can get relief because of the criminal acts that were committed. So rights always derive from another's duty to act. That's the doctrine of duties and rights. Anybody, you can read it. That's where rights come from. Rights always derive from another's duty to act. That's why a law is nothing more than the establishment of an obligation. It creates the right, which exists, or it establishes the right, it preserves the right through the establishment of an obligation. That's what a law is. It establishes an obligation. So I have an obligation to not kill someone. I have an obligation to not steal from someone. I have an obligation to not assault someone. If I breach my obligation, I assault you, then your right to not be assaulted has been violated, but your right to not have to not be assaulted cannot be violated until someone breaches their obligation of not violating it, right? That's why rights derive from another's duty to act. So when you say that you have the right to an indictment by a grand jury, you don't have the right. Because before you have that right, you have to show that someone else had a duty of guaranteeing your right to the trial by grand jury. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to the judges and I'm saying, judges, you all had an obligation constitutionally codified to ensure that there was an indictment by a grand jury in place before you arrested these people. And guess what? It wasn't there. By your breach of obligation, now everyone's rights have been violated. I'm not fighting for your rights of an indictment by a grand jury. I'm fighting for the obligation of making sure that there was an indictment by grand jury in place before they arrested you. It's the opposite. So these people that are arguing with me, that are pushing against me, that are fighting against me, they're over on the other side, right? They're looking at it from an administrative perspective. They're looking at it from a money cost perspective. They need to stop and they need to understand that we're all on this together. We're all working together. I'm working on something that's different because I'm an expert in a different type of law. I'm not an attorney. I will never be an attorney. I didn't do administrative law. I have substantive law. I'm law enforcement law. I am an expert in enforcing the law. Let me enforce the law. Let me do what the other people don't do. All these attorneys are the opposite of me because I enforce, they administer. I enforce, they administer. That's why I'm effective against them. I'm the opposite of an attorney. I will never claim to be one. Okay? I fight for the Constitution of the people because I am in the enforcement of the people's law. I don't care about administrative law. I could give a shit about what judges say. If they're criminals, they're pieces of shit, and I don't fight for pieces of shit. I certainly am not going to call a piece of shit honorable. Not going to happen. So there's where we're at. So I don't see where a moderator might be here. So I'm now talking, but let's go into here and so again, Kevin, going back to what we were saying there is that a crime was committed. Crime was committed, absolutely, 100%. When they said to you, if you don't pay my child support, if you don't enter into this contract to agree to pay, then I'm going to send you to prison for 18 months. So you cannot enter into a contract without your consent. You cannot enter into a contract without proper consideration. Duress is a justifiable defense for a crime, a breach of contract, or a tort. So when they say to you that you must enter into this contract, me, the state, agree to pay me this, and you're going to do it by your consent. I'm going to take your property away by your consent because you agreed to do it. I'm going to say to you, bullshit. You threatened him. You threatened him. And you can't threaten him. You can't abuse the powers that you have in order to get them to enter into a contract. By your breach or by your abuse of powers, you have formulated a contract that's not valid. Because in contract law, a contract is invalid if the way in which the contract is formed is illegal, then the contract formed is then illegal. So if you use duress to formulate a contract, that formulates a void contract. It's not valid. You can't hold a gun to someone's head and say, sign this contract or I'm going to shoot you. Much less you could say, I'm going to send you to prison for 18 months unless you sign this contract. It's void. It's completely without force or effect. Once again, Government cannot do these things without lawful authority. You cannot abuse the powers that you're given in order to offend the very people that your obligations are created to protect. Can't do it. So if I abuse my powers in order to offend the ones that my powers are designed to protect, then by my abuse of the powers that I've been given, I'm now an enemy of it. The power is transferred to me. You see, we have the power today. You guys all have the power today. Because the very law that they're using against you, you can now turn around on them, right? Because when they say to you, you're going to go to jail for 18 months, Kevin, you need to turn around and say to him, yeah, well, you're going to go to the noose. I mean, I'm sorry, but your punishment's a little worse than mine because you're breaking the law right now. And when you break the law doing the things that you're doing, then guess what? The punishment for you is a lot worse than it is for me. And the people are justified in such actions because you promised to do something and you're destroying it and you're going against the people and you're hurting the very object that the laws are created in order to preserve and protect. I mean, what do you want to do? Do you really want to go through this with me, right? Do you really want to pursue this contract with me? Because I'll tell you what, I'll sign this contract under duress, but tomorrow I'm going to be pursuing the criminal actions against you for the crimes that you just committed in extorting money from me through the abuse of your powers, which is treason. So it is a crime. Absolutely, it's a crime. You don't have to enter into any contracts with the state. And if any agent of a state abuses any discretionary power with which they're invested in law, that is the crime of extortion. Black's Law, 2006. Any public official that abuses any discretionary power with which they're invested in law commits the crime of extortion. That's directly out of Black's, word for word, right there, okay? So any public official that abuses any discretionary power with which they're invested in law commits the crime of extortion. So when CPS comes to you and says, well, you better, because remember, CPS is an agent of the state. They're enforcing the laws of the state. They are an agent of the state. When any CPS officer comes up to you and says, yeah, if you don't agree to pay us, then we're going to send you to prison for 18 months. How's that any different than a mob? If your business doesn't pay us, then guess what? We're going to go ahead and take your life away. It's the same thing, man. They're just a bunch of gangsters. That's all they are. Abusing the power that they have in order to get what they want by extorting the money from you. Very simple. Very simple. Now, along the same lines, remember, when they get a contract to take your child from you, that also is an agreement. Whether you know it or not, whether you willfully did it or not, you've entered into a contract with them, and they took your child. This was happening. This happened in Germany in 1933. They did this to the Jews. Like I was over here at the Holocaust Museum over the weekend, and I'm about to write something because it was nauseating, absolutely nauseating, because the path that we are on, the things that we're doing, is the exact same things I was reading on every single one of the walls within that Holocaust Museum. Every single one of them, all the way from moving all of the lower people that they felt were lower into ghettos, and then bringing them directly out of the ghettos and putting them into these prisons where they enslaved them, right? It's horrible. And then they would take their children from them through deceit, and then they would euthanize the children. I mean, I don't even know what to say on that. Like I was there on Sunday, and what I read on those walls was the scariest fucking thing I've ever read. Sorry for the language, but it was the scariest thing I've ever seen. Because America, we're doing the same exact thing, the same step by step, the same thing that the Nazis did. And you know why? Because in 1933, remember, that's when the America went into bankruptcy. That's when the Fed system was established. 1933 was when Adolf Hitler was moved up into chancellor, right? 3 months later, all power, legislative power, was vested and transferred to him, right? So now the executive branch was in charge of creating all legislation. What's Chevron, guys? All legislative power shifted to the executive branch. That's what Chevron was. That the executive branch could alter, amend, or destroy the law based upon their ambiguity. I mean, that's what happened in Germany. That's how Adolf Hitler was able to do the things he did, was because all legislative power transferred to the executive officer. We are on a very, very scary path. That's why I say that I'm very thankful that God's kept me protected through all this, because, you know, I had this conversation with some people earlier today, and that's that, you know, I'm very thankful actually that I don't have much money. All right, I'm thankful that every single day I'm having to look for, you know, where my provisions for the day are going to come, because I don't have any extra money, you guys. This suit I bought at Goodwill just the other day for $4. It came directly from the dry cleaners. You know, it's already starched and pressed. Guys, I don't have money. I haven't accepted a paycheck in 9 years. I will not accept a paycheck. What I do for free. And that way I can focus on what I do as opposed to the money that I make, right? I won't accept paycheck, right? I will only work for all of you. I will not work for any of you. I will not enter into a contract, because I need to make sure that I have the greatest flexibility to be able to do the things I know God needs me to do at any given time without having the limitations of a contract or anything else. I need to be able to do what's right at any given moment. So the thing is that you know, I'm glad that I don't have extra money, because that reduces my personal ability to have error, right? Because if I had money, I'd be like, man, I'd sure like to go down to Florida this weekend. Let's go to Florida. Let's have a rally in Florida, right? Well, if God doesn't need me to have a rally in Florida, I'm not going to have the money to go to Florida, right? If God doesn't need me out of DC, I'm not going to have the vehicle. When my vehicle was taken a few weeks ago, the 9th vehicle that was stolen, when it was taken from Denver a few weeks ago, I was actually on my way up to Minnesota. I was going there because I felt, wow, this is where I need to go, right? That was me making that decision. When in all reality, I had to come back here to DC. It was time for me to return. There's certain things that happened here, certain people that I met, and certain things that occurred that was necessary for me to be here. The only way I would have came back here is by having that vehicle taken away. It sucks when it happens at the time, but it happens. These things happen to me because it directs me where I need to go, right? Because sometimes the only way to be able to hear what God is trying to say to you is by putting yourself in a position where you need to hear, because you don't have any other choice, right? So I'm very, very thankful that I don't have extra money, right? And I'm very, very thankful that all of you, when I do need something, you guys are there for me. You guys are always there. Like, thank you guys so much. I have not had to sleep on a park bench for probably a year and a half, and it's incredible. Trust me. I haven't had to be in a homeless shelter for a couple of years, but you know, that's because you guys, when I need it, you guys always step up, and thank you so much. Bless all of you. It's incredible. But you guys are keeping me afloat. But you're keeping me afloat because at any given time, I need to know if tomorrow I need to go to, say, Nebraska, then I will have the resources to go to Nebraska. Not only will I have resources, but I will know, okay, there's an event there that I would like to be at, that I feel like I need to be at. But if the resources aren't available, I can't go. Can't happen. So it makes it a lot easier for me to be able to listen to God, do what God needs me to do at any given time by not having extra resources. So there's that. But I don't remember what I was getting at on that. So I'm here in DC, and I'm probably going to remain here now until this is over. I don't know. I don't have a vehicle anymore. We don't have anything, right? So I lost everything in Denver a few weeks ago. When I returned back here to DC, all I had was just the clothes that I had on. We've now purchased a bunch of I'm now, dressed up again. But the things that I wear, I might look like I have a lot of money. I constantly have people asking me for money without realizing that, hey, I'm homeless just like you, brother. I mean, I do this because all of you need this, right? Because someone has to do this for you, because you guys don't have the money to pay the people that should be doing it for you. And so I don't do this because I make money. I do this because I love my country, and I know that my country is nothing more than an aggregate of the people. Therefore, the reason why I love my country is because I love all of you, right? And one of the most amazing things that I've been and had the privilege and blessing to be able to do is to be able to travel across this country 18 times over the last 16 months. 18 times, coast to coast, back and forth. And most of the time, I didn't have my own vehicle. Most of the time. And so, I've actually hitchhiked back and forth across this country two different times over the 16 months. But I do that because because I've had the opportunity to see how beautiful this country is. This country is fucking beautiful, right? We have got some of the most incredible, amazing things. West Virginia, you guys, if there's anybody in my West Virginia people here, man, you guys got some incredible falls. I love Blackwater Falls, and oh my God, you got some beautiful country there. You know, Arizona, New Mexico, you guys, anybody here? Arizona, New Mexico? Man, you guys got some beautiful country too. I love it, love it. You know, I mean, I've had some amazing places that I've gone. I am camped in every single state I've been, except for, you know, Alaska and Hawaii. Of course, I'm not walking to Alaska or Hawaii, but not to leave you guys out, Alaska, Hawaii. I'm sure you guys are beautiful as well. I've been to Alaska, Hawaii, not quite yet, but one of these days soon, I hope, I pray. But you guys, the reason why I've come to understand how beautiful America is because I've had the privilege of meeting all of you, right? And your family. You guys have been just incredible to me, not only in bringing me into your family and letting me know what has happened to you, the injustices that's happened. You guys have actually restored my faith in humanity because it was gone. When I left government, I had no faith in humanity, right? It was you guys did this. You guys restored my faith. And so when we talk about these prisoners, right? When we talk about these people that are in prison, I had an amazing blessing to be able to go and spend time with them, getting to know them, learning what made them happy, what made them sad, realizing that these people are no different than anyone else. They're incredible. They're amazing people. They're just human beings that need some help. They have incredible blessings. They have incredible talents. They're no different. We just need to take what is incredible about them and focus it in the direction that they want to go. Nobody wants to be a slave. That's not a job that anyone wants to have at all. Everyone wants to be a part of society. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be respected. And everybody deserves that. We can take these people we call criminals today and we can restore them back by simply saying, you know what? What happened to you, the harm, the hurt, the trauma that you have, we're going to heal that because I know that you're better than that, right? I mean, these people, we can turn this whole thing around. We can, because those very people that society says are worthless and cast away and threw into an institution that we call prisons that has labeled them nothing but felons and pieces of shit, those people saved my life. They saved my life. Because when I was going through a divorce and I lost my kids and everything that I owned, those people saved my life. And I owe them my life now. Because without them, I could have died a million times over. I didn't want a divorce. I didn't want to lose my kids 9 years ago, but that had to happen because sometimes in order to help others, you got to suffer alongside them. So these people, these brothers and these sisters that are in these institutions that we call worthless and no good and we cast away, I can tell you right now, they're not worthless because they saved my life. They saved my life. And now I owe them mine. So I'm sorry that we didn't get in and answer too many questions here, guys. I'm really sorry about that. I can't really talk and do this. Next time I'll try to schedule something here again and maybe get someone else invited so that we can have someone else on the screen. Maybe I'll get a little bit of practice and training on it. But you guys, we got to fight for everybody here. Everybody. Because all these children that are being taken from their homes, every single one of them is harmed. And that harm that's created by the removal of the love of their parents and the love of their family, that's creating an adult that is not able to adjust to society, right? Every single prisoner is someone's child. And I want every single child back home to their family. Every single one of them. Because the only reason why I do the things I do is because I now believe in something that I never believed in before. You see, when I was 2 years old, my dad left. I didn't have a dad. When I was 6, my mom left. I never had a mom. I grew up without parents, without family. And how can someone believe in something that they don't have? So when I got married, I didn't know how to have a family because I didn't believe in family. It wasn't something that I could ever. But God said, you know what? I want you to understand what the family produces, which is something I never had before, and that's called love. So I didn't have love for mom. I didn't have love for dad. I didn't have those things. And so then when God introduced me to it, and I felt it for the first time, I got to say that I will fight every second the rest of my life to get that feeling back once again. Because the only thing I ever loved was my wife and my kids. And when they were stolen from me, it left me in a place that that is as close to death as I think a person can ever reach. And I know that all of you are in the same place, because love is the only thing that gives us life. Without it, we're dead. And I'd like that back one of these days, someday. So I'm gonna end it with this, you guys. That a lot of people ask me about this ring I have on. They say, "Well, are you hanging on to your wife?" Whatever. It was 9 years ago that we went through divorce. But let me tell you the story about this ring, okay? It was 9 years ago that I went through this divorce. 9 years. And when it happened, my wife, I'd never been arrested in my life. My wife called up the police, and her attorney, divorce attorney, said to get me arrested, get a no contact order put into place so that they can have tactical advantage of the divorce proceedings. That was what started all. So that morning I woke up from sleep, and she said, "Well, hey, police are on their way. I'm going to get everything. You're going to get nothing. You'll never see your kids again." I didn't know what was going on. Like I didn't know. All I did was worked every day, like always gone. I was making millions of dollars, and I just I wasn't paying attention to her needs because I didn't understand the family. I was running away from it because I didn't know how to be a dad. I didn't know how to be a husband because I didn't have that example myself, right? And so I was running away and building this great big company, and then I was buying, my wife or buying my kids and just giving them whatever they want, anything you want, millions of dollars, here, just have it all. I didn't know that what they really wanted was me. That was it. So when this happened, all of my property, when you're arrested, all your property goes into jail, right? And you can release your property. So I released my property to her, and she went and she pawned my wedding ring. And so I got out, and my daughters at the time were 6 or 7, maybe. I think 7. I think they were 7. And when I saw them, they said, "Well, Dad, let's go get you a ring." And I said, "Okay, well, why?" He said, "Well, because we want you to be married to God now." And so that's why I wear it on my right hand. It's never come off. I mean, even when I'm in jail, I've never taken this ring off. That's why I wear it on my right hand. I don't wear it on my left hand, because my daughters, when they were 7, said that they wanted to give me a ring so that I could be married to God now. And so that's why I have this ring. That's why I wear it every day. It's not because I'm attached to my wife. It's not because I'm some psychopath, whatever. It's because my daughters felt very strongly that I needed to have, I needed to still have some love in my life. So that was one of the last times I ever got to see them or talk to them, 9 years ago. So guys, God bless you. Please, if you can, we need to spread this information, especially my videos, as much as possible. It's really, really important we get as much of this information out into the public domain, because this is going to help a lot of people. And it's not just for me, it's for a lot of people. It's a lot of families, it's a lot of children, a lot of people are going to be helped. Just for me, it's for a lot of people. It's a lot of families, it's a lot of children, a lot of people are going to be helped by a lot of people are going to be helped by the work I've already done. And so if we can get this out, this isn't just for my benefit, this is for your benefit. So the more we can share the videos, the more we can spread it, the more we can get the algorithms up, the more likely that the right person to hear this is going to hear it. Because I guarantee you that sometime within the next 3 weeks, this is going to hit, it's going to pop, because if this doesn't happen by the election, I'm probably not going to live, right? The only reason why I'm alive right now doing this is because I have the protection of the election, because they can't have a scandal this close to the election. If it's past the election, then I'm in a lot of danger. And I know that God doesn't make fools. He didn't lead me to do the things I'm doing to fail. This is going to happen, you guys. It's going to happen. And we just need to make sure that we do our part individually to get the information out there, because we never know who needs to hear it, who needs to receive it. So please share, please like, please do whatever you can. If you can, right? Don't take anything from your family, but if you can, help, even $1, $2, $5, every little bit helps, because I am paid up until Friday in my current room. Thank you guys for the support that you gave me to get me that 10 days covered. But as of Friday, I am once again without any funding once again. So it costs $31 a night as long as I pay 10 days in advance. Otherwise, it's $35 a night. I stay as cheap as I possibly can. I buy as cheap as I can. All because I know that you guys don't have the money to be able to do it. So why the hell should I have the money to do it? I saw this video on TikTok this morning of an attorney called Fat Attorney or something out of Atlanta, and I just wanted to vomit. I mean, the guy's driving around, dancing around in this blue suit with a Rolls Royce, there, and I'm like, that's the shit that we're fighting, man. I mean, he wants to talk about a servant. Come on, man. How many of your clients have a Rolls Royce? What kind of sacrifice is that, right? And then to make matters worse, you're profiting off the illegal acts that you commit? Come on, man. So if you guys can help, I would really appreciate it. Once again, I'm not looking for a lot of money because I want to make sure that I'm always at every single turnaround. I want to know that I'm doing the right thing because I'm able to hear God, because I don't have the things to have my own mind say, oh, let's go do this, and have the resources to do it. So thank you guys so much. God bless you. We have Cash App, we have Chime, we have Venmo, we have PayPal. They're all exactly the same. It's We Shall Be Free. And you guys, I'm going to schedule another one of these. I hope that this helped. I'll make sure that the next one is in the proper format so we can actually get questions from all of you. I love you. Thank you so much. God bless. And together, we shall be free, guys. Thank you.